Hello and welcome to this Dialogue Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin. At the 2015 Sun Valley Writers Conference, I interviewed PBS NewsHour journalist Jeffrey Brown about his new book of poems called The News. I encourage you to watch that interview at video.idahoptv.org. Afterwards, we taped an additional conversation with Brown about his work as chief arts correspondent for the NewsHour. Take a listen. I want to talk to you about your work. You started and run something you call the Culture Desk at the NewsHour. You have a successful arts blog as well that I encourage people to go take a look at. But this is not news light in your view. This is on par with any other kind of reporting.
That's how I feel about it. That's very important to me that we approach it that way. It's not obvious to everybody that the arts would be on a nightly news program. They don't show up that much. And when they do, there is a kind of light, as in L-I-T-E, sense to it. That's the one thing I didn't want us to do. The case that I made internally, and it wasn't hard, it already existed when I came, but I tried to there was a point where I was able to, as a producer first, one of the senior producers of the show, I was in charge of overseeing a lot of the show, and so I tried to build up the back of the book, the last 15 minutes, say, of the hour, to allow us to do a lot of different things: culture, arts, religion, a lot of things that hit people in their gut or in their hearts that might not be the top story of the day. But the case that I wanted to make was always that the arts are as important as that lead story when it comes to telling us about who we are. It may not be the most immediate thing, as in, here's what happened today, and I don't make that case. I'm not going to lead the program with a writer. We're going to lead the program with what happened in Iraq or on the stock market or what have you. But as someone who interviews and reports on stories of business and the economy and war and things like that, I just wanted us to treat the arts with the same sort of rigor. I didn't want it to be light in that sense. So the people that I work with, I always say, we're going to ask the same sort of who, what, where, why questions. We're going to write stories that aren't just kind of entertainments. I want them to be thoughtful.
Well, you're going to places where news is happening, such as Cuba.
Yeah.
And then interviewing
that's been the most fun for me. I mean, fun is stimulating, enlightening, to go to places that are real newsworthy. And we do news stories, but I always try to bring in the arts to it. So I always look for writers or artists, because frankly, I think, I mean, one of the places where I really learned this the first time was going to the Middle East, one of the first trips there, to Israel and the West, to Palestine, and talk to writers, and who are living amidst this, and we've done, like everybody, all kinds of stories about where we talk to the generals and we talk to the politicians and we look at the turmoil there. But here are writers, poets in this case, who are writing about what it's like to live there, and it told you so much about the realities. So wherever I go, this is always part of what I do, to look for that angle, as a way of augmenting the coverage.
It's often how the people in those areas are helping themselves survive too, is through the arts.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you
They're telling their stories. Yep. They're telling their own story through the arts. They're learning to survive. I mean, one of the most powerful things I ever saw was in Haiti after the earthquake. This was 6 months after the earthquake. So it was after the immediate disaster. But my God, people were still trying to dig out, and the tent camps and all. But I went to they called it a library, but it's a very small place where it had been a weekly gathering of writers, of Haitian writers. They'd been meeting for years, and they come every week, and they share their poetry and short stories, and a lot of them do art, and they would teach each other. and they would bring in kind of the leading writers of Haiti to come in and do master classes. So as I say, they've been doing this for years, and here they were after the earthquake, all still getting there, which wasn't easy, you know, and in this little room, and it was stiflingly hot, and they had, you know, a drummer, and it was wild, and they were trading off stories. And what was the poetry about? Well, now, of course, it was about the earthquake, and cholera had set in, and there were, you know, it was sort of about the horror, but it was also about the beauty and the power. And that's what you see wherever you go, of course, is that the arts are a way of showing the beauty and power of these places, the, you know, the culture that's so alive and so rich in a place like Haiti. Because we on the news, and I hate this about what we do, because then that we only show Africa, you know, as a disaster. And it's all about AIDS, and it's all about war, and it's all about despotism and that kind of thing. And I have so much enjoyed going to Africa and other places. Haiti is another example where you're able to show the richness of life, which is actually, of course, I mean, these other things exist, of course, but I mean, there's so much richness of life going on at the same time.
Do you miss the anchor desk, or getting to do these type of things fair recompense?
More than fair.
Yeah.
No, more than fair. I really, this is what I wanted to do. I don't miss it. No, I was getting to the point, actually, of, I mean, I guess maybe the poetry reflects this, but, or the doing of the poetry. The Daily News, and I write this at the end, the Daily News, I think I say, is a beast that must be fed. And I have been doing it a long time. And the anchoring, sitting in the Washington studio night after night, I like that, and I loved it at times, but I also got kind of tired of doing that, where you're really so ruled by the what happens, you know, from moment to moment. And especially the last maybe couple of years now, where I've been freer to go out. I'm still in Washington most of the time, and, you know, doing whatever the news comes up, but I'm so much freer now to go and do these, through the creation of the Culture Desk, to do stories around this country and around the world, and, you know, I enjoy the hell out of it. Yeah.
I do want to ask you what Fred Friendly was like.
Fred Friendly.
Because you have the wonderful opportunity to work with him on those seminars that are so famous. Yeah.
Fred was my first sort of major mentor. I've just been lucky to be around some very major figures, and I met him at the Columbia Journalism School, where he was a professor at that point, and he was running his own small production company, which was the producer of the Media and Society seminars. So maybe a lot of people in your audience will remember some of those. So I still sometimes turn on the TV and they're still there. It amazes me. But so I was in my 20s and met Fred, and I had, in part of my checkered career leading up to where I went in and out of school, I went to law school. So I never finished, but I studied law. And Fred was doing a lot in those Media and Society seminars dealing with law. And so I met him there. I started working with him even while I was at Columbia. And then after I graduated, I became his TA for the class he taught there, and he hired me, and I was a producer with him for a couple of years. Larger than life figure, much loved, much not loved by, you know, I mean, because he was so larger than life. He had been Edward R. Murrow's producer. He had become the president of CBS News. He fancied that he had created much of television news, which is why some people who thought they had a hand in it too weren't always happy with Fred, you know, taking the credit. A big figure in every way, a large man who would sort of impose his will on you in a very personal way. Working for him was quite a trip, because he felt nothing wrong with calling you in the middle of the night. And my wife still tells the stories of her being pregnant with our first child at the time. And, you know, Fred would call up at almost he didn't care what time it was. And he would say, Jeff, Jeff, I want you to meet me tomorrow in St. Louis, you know, in the airport in St. Louis, because we're going to do, really? We're going to St. Louis? yeah, that's the way he sort of operated. It was a different time. He had come from CBS where they had a lot of money, for one thing. We don't operate that way anymore. It's too expensive to suddenly say we're going to St. Louis tomorrow. But yeah, we would do things like that, and he would say, come and. He would just, if 11 o'clock, I've got an idea. What do you think about this? So that was Fred. It was something to work with him and learn from him, because he really was there for the creation and so experienced and thoughtful about television news. I mean, he's one of the greats, so it was a great opportunity.
Yes, you're very privileged to have that opportunity, and it sounds like it prepared you well for the maelstrom of live television. So.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Fred always, all the things that happened to us in live television, Fred sort of showed me were going to happen. Fred always said it's funny because we were talking earlier about the things that happen like with the video, but I remember what often mess up in the media and society things was the audio. And Fred would always say, I can't say it because it involves a swear here, but it's the audio that, blah, blah, blah. And I always remember that years later when we're doing an interview and somebody says, oh, we didn't get that on audio, or the microphone went out. I said, yep, that's what Fred told me many years ago. It's you spend all this time thinking, because it's a visual language here, so we're mostly thinking about lighting and cameras, and then it's the audio, so.
It is the audio. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully all our audio, I feel confident, is here.
Got it.
And I've enjoyed talking with you. Thanks for taking the time to talk about what you do.
Thanks, I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to PBS NewsHour senior correspondent Jeffrey Brown. For more information about Brown, check out the Dialogue website. Just go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for watching this Dialogue Extra.